And welcome back to Extra Short. What a great discussion to kickstart day one of the DSP Leaders World Forum. I'm here with Chris Lewis, Managing Director at Lewis Insight. Chris, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Now, Chris, before I even ask you about the highlights of the conversation we've just heard, to start with, the very fact that we are having a conversation around talent acquisition and retention and the need to upskill the workforce in the telecom sector, to which extent does it show that HR has become strategic to the future of the industry?
If by HR you mean getting the best out of the talent that exists within an organization and recruiting new talent, then yes, absolutely, because what we're seeing within the telecom sector, as was discussed in the panel, is a significant change in the way the workforce is made up. Much more of a shift, as Scott Petty from Vodafone was talking about, this shift to becoming more of a technology provider within the organization. But fundamentally the industry is changing. When we're moving away from this inward-looking industry to one that has to look outside and deliver operationally efficient, very, very clear, concise services to the broader community. And I thought Cormac Williams' comment from Dell was very interesting about allowing the organisms in ecosystems outside of the telecom industry to come in and influence what we're doing within the telco is a really important one. We have to change the culture, the whole culture of the industry, away from the telco knows best to how telco can best serve the other parts of the other players in the ecosystem. So yeah, HR in the sense of getting the best out of the existing workforce, and then about creating this new influx of people with the skills, the digital skills that will help operationally drive that efficiency, but also to create the relevance and increase the relevance, but to build the longevity. And I think one of the dangers that was referred to during the discussion there is that the younger people coming into the industry, I think Graham Wild from Hutch mentioned this, that bringing younger people in, they're not so attracted to it. And then also, as was mentioned, people, the length of the career that they look for, they're not looking to stay with one company for the whole of their career. They're looking to move around and find new challenges and do new things. So there's so many moving parts, this industry.
Absolutely. So how acute is the problem currently within the industry? I mean, currently every sector is facing this war for talent and the need to upskill amid digitalization, the adoption of emerging tech, etc., and the need, of course, to engage people post-pandemic in particular. How critical is it?
I mean, it's absolutely fundamental, and in fact, in some ways, for the telecom industry, it's worse because you've also got this. We've heard from many companies like Vodafone and BT over the last few weeks about how many layoffs they're going to make. They're fundamentally overmanned, and they're overmanned with the wrong sort of people. So we're going to lose from the top end, the longer serving. So we have a question about how much knowledge we might lose from the industry, which is a major issue. And then how do we attract new talent in? But at all levels, frankly, not just the coding levels as we referred to during the session there, but at all levels. So attracting that talent, making sure that the industry is appealing to bring both young people and other skills in from other industries. And I think from a B2B point of view, bringing in talent that understands how other industries work is really important. If we're going to help build those mobile private networks that Graham mentioned for ports and the like, we need to understand those industries, and I don't think we have that knowledge within the industry. In fact, we're sort of caught on the horns of a dilemma, aren't we? On the one hand, we want to rationalise, simplify, the better organised and reduce the cost of operations, and therefore automation and the like kicks in. On the other, we want to better understand and work more closely with customers. Well, I think there's a dilemma there, and I'm not sure, depending on which telco you are, which horn you sit on.
The point you are raising ties in very nicely with a question we've had from a member of the audience, and I'd like to remind our audience that you should feel free and encouraged to send us your questions and comments. We want to interact with you, so please send them in. And the question we've got here is there another transformation going on here within the telecom sector where we go from technology telco to a financial telco, for instance? So how can we leverage what's happening in fintech, for instance? I mean, you've mentioned widening the range of skills we are attracting, and in fact, we heard during the conversation that we should attract skills from the financial sector, for instance, startups and different ecosystems.
I think the challenge that we've got here is that we can't do everything, and I think this is the problem the industry faced in the past, that we thought we could do everything, and we kept trying to move and expand beyond what the telco. So in some ways, the telco to techco transition is the wrong one. Although I think Scott nailed it in one of his final comments there. He said, we need to simplify the offerings that we provide to the customers, manage it more efficiently, and therefore not try and almost restrict and focus more of our efforts. So the financial one is a good question. In certain markets, absolutely. The success of mobile payments has been phenomenal in let's say in some of the more emerging economies where the banking system is not so established. Would that be the case in every other market? Not necessarily, but understanding how the financial industry works will help the telecom industry sell its services into those sectors, as I mentioned previously. So I think that we do need outside influence. We need to change. But if you think about it, if you step back, and as Graham encouraged us to think about the last 100 and whatever years, the 200 years of the industry, we've gone through some major shifts. This shift of opening up the markets, of liberalisation, deregulation, started with BT being privatised in the early 80s. So we're only really 40 years in. I say only 40 years in, but actually it's taken a long time to undo a lot of the bureaucratic structures that existed within the telecom industry. And then on top of that now, so we've got much more competition encouraged by regulation in different parts of the world. We've also got the stratification of the industry, where we're moving away from the fully vertically integrated telco to have some of these underlying infrastructure players like tower players and so on, and the underlying fibre infrastructure. So we have a challenge in terms of working out what is a telco. And my question to the industry is, what is it that we're selling to the B2B or the B2B2C market? And I think we lose sight of that. We don't talk often enough about what the actual product is that we're selling to the end customer, and that will help better determine what skills we need within the industry, how the industry cooperates and collaborates with other parties, let alone hyperscalers, but every participant. So the skill base, we know, as you mentioned, is limited, and as for all sorts of economic and political reasons, and therefore we do need to lean on partners. We need to collaborate a lot more in order to build that right environment.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you very much. It's now time to move across the room to join Yanni, who's by the coffee van. Actually, Yanni, over to you. Welcome back to Extra Shot. Still with Chris Lewis, Managing Director at Lewis Insight, to talk about the talent crisis faced by the industry currently. And Chris, earlier you talked about the need to attract different skills to the industry coming from different sectors like financial services, for instance, tech, of course. But I think what's important here as well, and we've heard it during the previous discussion, it's attracting different profiles in terms of individuals as well, and making sure that we have a bit more diversity and inclusion going on within the telecom industry.
Absolutely, in fact, on various fronts. Okay, so interesting during the opening discussion that a lot was talked about attracting graduates and of course we need the data scientists and we need people with that coding experience. But what we really need within the organisations is such a broad base of cultural diversity, which obviously reflects society, because we want to reflect society, but also that reflect the diversity in terms of both, of course, women in technology has been a big theme for years. Being a blind person, I've been doing a lot of work around disabled people in industry as well. And actually the more software-centric industry that we're now part of actually opens up opportunities to diversify the workforce, to have all those people feeding into the sort of the way services are built, improving employment opportunities for people with disability, for all sorts of ethnic areas as well. But it also, more importantly in many ways, starts to build the output, the services, the customer interface, the customer interaction, which allows for everybody to benefit. And one of the problems we've had in the past is that we say that we've designed for the centre, so if I'm going to be politically a little bit incorrect, we've designed for the polo shirt wearing Anglo-Saxon middle-aged male, because they're the ones who could afford it, and we design for them. If we design for the edge, we design for people with disabilities, the ageing population, people who are economically disadvantaged, people who are digitally not skilled enough, then actually but really importantly, it expands the market possibility. So I think, as Scott mentioned in his comments, bringing more people into the customer base is one way that we're going to grow this market. So there are a lot of opportunities. Of course, there's the political angle about diversification, but I think the cultural diversification of the telecoms organisations. In fact, last week was Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and I happened to be at BT for their results briefing with the CEO and the team. But I walked in and there was actually an accessibility session going on in the lobby where they're talking about how we design things, literally from the physical product that comes through your door, the router that comes through your door and the boxing, to the applications that we use, to the customer interface, all these things. And if you think about it, the diverse nature of the people that we're serving as an industry, we need to be able to adapt and use technology to adapt around that. So yeah, more diverse the better.
Absolutely. And as you have mentioned, it's not just about being good, diversity, okay? It's actually about attracting top talent to the industry, but also, like you said, maybe understand the audience, the customers better, because they are a diverse bunch, aren't they?
Absolutely, and in fact, one of the things that we are seeing in employment terms is looking at people on the autism spectrum. Because the way the brains work is not the way we would say traditionally work, and therefore they're thinking differently about technology, thinking differently about the services. So we need to make sure within the telecom industry we have representation of all those customer groups, and hence a much more diverse set of employees. And of course, you can use people with different disabilities as part of the contact center, because not everyone needs to see, not everyone needs to hear. Think about the multiple channels that we use as an industry to communicate with people. So let's build accessibility, build diversity in from scratch. And in that way, we're designing for the edge of the market. We get the center for free. So it actually really enhances the way our companies work, changes the cultural outlook of the industry, of the business, and changes the way that people think about the industry. As was mentioned in the opening session, what do people think about the telecom industry? If we make it a more diverse, more open environment, then more people will be attracted to come and work in it.
Yeah, it's part of a branding efforts, I guess, to relabel the industry as something a bit sexier and friendlier than it is currently. Chris, last question, maybe to wrap up this conversation. Has the industry kept up enough with the pace of change?
Well, I mean, there are various levels of change on there. So I mentioned in the opening comments the structural change of the industry. So the industry is changing, the economy is changing, and I think that's perhaps one of the biggest things to think about is the relative position of telecoms in the broader ecosystem, the broader economic activity. And yes, what we've provided through delivering broadband is the ability for us all to get on, engage, and do a lot more things online. Let's not forget the human touch, the person to person, like we are here today. They're building that. But are we behind? I think the measurements of diversity within the industry, we need to accelerate that. We need to bump that up. I think understanding the relative role of telecoms in the broader economy is a really big thing to take on board. And therefore, not just thinking about the technology that we push out, but thinking about the relative role, connectivity. In fact, if I might introduce a new term into the industry, perhaps we should be just thought of as being broadco rather than techco or telco, because what we all want is broadband, whether that's fixed or mobile, and that will give us access to all the services that we, for our personal and our business lives, and will help grow the economy.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Chris Lewis, Managing Director at Lewis Insight. Thank you very much, Chris. It's now time for our next session. It's titled Achieving Maximum Operational Efficiency, How Service Providers Can Best Operate at Speed. We just mentioned the need for speed and scale. Over to you guys.